Welcome to Health Issues. I'm your host, Chris Sylvain, and believe me, we have a different show, but it's truly an exciting show that you want to be a part of. Again, we're on this series of prescription drug abuse, prescription opiate abuse and misuse. And who we have today is a gentleman, a special agent from the Drug Enforcement Administration, the DEA, Mr. Terry Davis. Welcome, sir.
Thank you for having me today.
No, we're excited to have you. Tell us a little bit about your background. I know that you've had several awards from the Secret Service and various areas of law enforcement. You've been a policeman and now with the DEA.
Yes. I've been in the military. I've been in law enforcement since 1993. I was a local police officer in a couple of places, and I've been with the Drug Enforcement Administration for a number of years. I've served here in the United States, in the Caribbean, and now I'm here in New Orleans. So.
Okay, and you were with the Navy, am I correct?
That is correct.
All right, and with, I guess, in investigations with the Navy also in that?
Yes, I was a military police officer in the Navy.
Awesome. So you've been in that area of law enforcement investigations for a good while.
Just a few years.
A young man, but a good one.
That's right. That's right.
Fantastic. Well, and again, I guess the big question is, tell us who is the DEA and how you guys fit in. You know, you have the FBI, the CIA, the DEA, the state police, and, you know, how does the DEA kind of work in?
Sure. The DEA, for your viewers who don't know, DEA was created in 1973 by President Richard Nixon. And so we just had our 40th year, of course. And so the way I like to explain it, because again, you got all these three-letter alphabets floating around with all these different agencies. So I like to say that DEA is in charge of going after the biggest and baddest drug traffickers around the world. That's what we primarily do.
Really?
We enforce any violations of the Controlled Substances Act, and of course that deals with all drugs, including pharmaceutical drugs. And so ATF does their thing, FBI does their thing. It jumps into what we do sometimes, but our primary goal is to go after drug traffickers.
Okay, and United States use a lot of drugs?
Unfortunately, yes, they do. In fact, when it comes to prescription drugs, you know, America is 4% of the world population, but we use 40% of the prescription drugs that are manufactured all around the world. Collectively, we use 40% of that. So that's a telling figure.
Now, that's the controlled substances drugs, or
correct,
just the general drugs?
Controlled substances drugs, and then of course there's a breakdown of some of the other drugs, cocaine, marijuana, that we're a pretty high consumer, a heroin of those substances as well, unfortunately.
Why is that?
I think it's a supply and demand.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. People in America have a lot of mental issues, or whatever.
Issues.
All right. Or recreational, whatever it is. They're consuming huge amounts of drugs. So there's been an explosion, you know, and throughout this series, those that have been watching, this huge explosion of the use of prescription opiates, particularly hydrocodone, oxycodone. I think those are probably the big two you've been seeing. Yes,
that would be a fair statement. Hydrocodone, oxycodone, opioid-based prescription drugs.
Okay, the opioid-based drugs, and it would also bring in, I think there's a carisoprodol and the alprazolam, those.
Yes, Xanax, Adderall, of course, carisoprodol, those different types of drugs, better known as Soma. Those drugs are very prevalent as well, yes.
Okay, but the main two are those opiates that drive people, that people become addicted to.
Correct.
All right, and they keep on using them over and over again. So the question then becomes how you guys are focused on keeping them away from the recreational users, so to speak.
Well, you know, primarily, as far as DEA is concerned, we're focused on. Let me back up. We understand that prescription drugs operate in what's called a closed circle, right? Okay. They're manufactured by a distributor. They're then given to a pharmacy, and then to an end user by way of a doctor. We all know that.
Right.
Okay. We also know that it's used for scientific purposes, research, those sorts of things. So, so our primary function and goal is not to disrupt that closed circle of distribution. That's not our goal. Okay. Our goal is to make sure that that particular circle remains unbroken, and that none of it ends up on the black market. That's our goal. And so as long as it doesn't get diverted to the black market, then the
it can do whatever
works.
it wants to in the system. It can fly throughout the circle all day long.
Works, right.
But once it starts moving away from that system,
correct,
and it hits the black market, then
correct.
And it can hit the black market from a number of ways.
Absolutely, which is an excellent point. And it has happened from a number of ways, from the distributor all the way down to a pharmacist or just the lay person that may be out on the street selling a substance. All sorts of ways. Just about any way you could think of, it has happened. And so we look to at ourselves as the keeper of the gate, so to speak, as far as this closed circle, to ensure that doesn't that they don't end up on the black market. Okay.
Now, there's some dynamics that play in drug use in the United States. You know, we talk about it a lot, that particularly, you know, DEA, law enforcement, you're dealing with incarceration. End goal is incarceration or something like that. When we look at Louisiana, highest rate of incarceration in the entire world, period. You know, and that's nutty, but, you know, highest rate of incarceration. 70% you're dealing with drug crimes because of this huge demand for drugs. Would it be that the same thing plays a part in prescription drug use, where 70%, in other words, African Americans, men, predominate the criminal justice system, and most are there because of drug crimes? Well, but African American men don't use drugs at the rate of everybody else. You know, in fact, less than Caucasians and a number of other groups, but still dominate the prison system. Does the same dynamic play out in opiate use and prescription drugs?
The short answer is no, and I'm going to tell you why. Whenever I do seminars on prescription drugs, and I have an audience full of people, I'll ask them. I'll put up just indiscriminate pictures of different people from different races, ethnicities, that sort of thing. And then I'll ask the rhetorical question, what does involving prescription drugs, what does a drug dealer look like? And I always kind of get that same shocked look that you have now, because I've found in my career that prescription drugs, especially those types of investigations, prescription drugs are colorblind. They have no geo-economical value based on anything other than, hey, this can be diverted for profit. So it is one of the only drugs that I've investigated in my career that knows no bounds. It is not discriminatory in any way, shape, form, or fashion.
It's just an equal opportunity drug.
It is.
The whole gamut, yeah. That's interesting, because, you know, you would think the other way. Now let's flip it around a little bit. But it's a closed medical system, and then it's actually medicine. It's different from, you know, somebody snorting cocaine or smoking marijuana and those types of things, because at this point there is somewhere, of course you have the gray areas where, you know, the pharmacist is just selling drugs, or the distributor is, you know, that type of thing. But just within the closed system, it's sealed. It's actually sealed. There is a physician that's saying, this patient needs this drug. And at the same time, there's an argument about the standard of practice. Should the patient get the drug? Some groups are saying, no, they shouldn't get the drug. The physician and others are saying, yes, they should get the drug. And how does the DEA get involved in that?
Well, remember, DEA is not necessarily a referee, if you will, between the doctor and the medical board. That's not our position. As I said before about ensuring that closed circle doesn't become broken and those items make it to the black market, that's our primary mantra. So my point is, when you're talking about a particular doctor and whether or not he or she may be performing to a certain level or standard of care based on a patient, oh, they need this medicine, oh, they're hurting, or whatever, we look as an agency at the overall perspective of a particular individual, be it, as you mentioned, the recreational user that's going to sell their pills on the street, be it the pharmacist that may be doing something that's not above board, or the doctor for his or her own selfish purposes through a wide swath of different items of evidence, patient profiles, etc. If we can see a large number, a convincing number, I should say, of patient related profiles that show there may be something more to look at here, then that's what we'll do. But we don't want to be in a position of not allowing patients to receive a certain standard of care, because we understand and appreciate that prescription drugs, when done the right way, are a positive contributing factor to society. We understand that, but we also know, again, that there is a criminal element, an undertone, unfortunately, to the whole prescription drug phenomenon that has now become an epidemic for us, Chris. Right now, our DEA administrator, Michelle Linhart, she has named prescription drugs as our number two drug threat throughout the world, next to cocaine, and that's a pretty telling statement. When you look, as you mentioned, just a few years back, that really wasn't the case. And so it's for a number of reasons, I think. Attitudinal issues in society, that you can pop a pill because it can take care of all your ailments, those issues you talked about, or from the same perspective, it's a money-making profit or money-making venture, and it's a known quantity. I think I can tell you, investigating normal drug trafficking organizations that aren't doctors or pharmacists, I think many of them have flocked to selling prescription drugs because, I don't have to break out a table scale and say, hey, is this little, bundle of heroin, is it really a gram? Is it really, cut the right way? Is it really? I don't have to do that with a prescription drug, right? A Vicodin is a Vicodin is a Vicodin, right? A hydrocodone tablet is a hydrocodone tablet. And so I think my point is there is some, it's become sexualized in a way that people that normally maybe wouldn't have even been involved in this type of illicit activity find the ease in it, as opposed to some of our other more hardcore drugs, or at least what they think to be hardcore drugs. Okay.
Awesome points. Really, really awesome points. Now, let's look at a scenario. Guy has gets in a car wreck, all right, bad back, he's hurt. Goes to the doctor. Doctor gives him prescription pain pills, hydrocodone, oxycodone, or whatever. He has to take them, say, for a month, 2 months.
Okay.
He's hooked. All right. Not his fault. If there was a drug that wouldn't make him hooked, the doctor would give it to him. But that's all that's available. Period. It's the only one. So he's hooked. Wasn't his fault. All right. Now that he's hooked, he keeps asking the doctor for more and more of the drug. Okay. And no help for him. So after a while, the doctor cuts him off. He moves to another pain clinic. Tries to find a pain clinic. At that point, that patient was a regular guy, corporate executive or homeless guy, doesn't matter which one he was, corporate homeless guy. Okay. And then all of a sudden he becomes a criminal. How do you guys see that?
I see it as a cycle, unfortunately. I can tell you right now, Chris, the cycle we're seeing here in Louisiana and in other places. New Orleans Field Division makes up the 4 states of Alabama, Arkansas, Mississippi, and Louisiana. Okay. And I can tell you here in this state, as well as specifically Alabama, we've now started seeing a cycle of abuse whereby maybe this guy that you just mentioned is in that precarious position of becoming hooked on pain medication, and he's shopping, basically. He's doctor shopping because he can't get it from one place, and now he's trying to get it from another place. And we see a cascading slide down a slippery slope whereby many of the same people who were once hooked on pain medication are now switching to heroin. It's an interesting phenomenon because the same opioid-based inhibitors are present, and the high is generally the same, but it's cheaper. And so we began to see a spike in heroin overdose deaths around the country, and also here in Louisiana, and specifically in Alabama, with a few investigations that we've done, in which the vast majority of those folks began using pain medication, prescription drugs, and ended up becoming, unfortunately, heroin addicts. And so it's a cycle that is alarming. It's a cycle that's important to us, that we are desperately trying to work with our community-based partners, other state and local agencies, our healthcare professionals, and those organizations as well, to try to do something, or do more, I should say, about it, because it is a phenomenon that it has definitely come full circle.
Well, the treatment, the strangest thing, now the treatment they're using, docs use the brand name for no other reason, Suboxone or whatever, or methadone,
right.
More likely they're using more the Suboxone or whatever. And studies are now showing basically we're trading one addiction for the other. And so to actually move somebody off these drugs are impossible, but the initial visit was over a backache. You know, and so within the context of a criminal, do they get separated from just the guy who, you know, just started going to parties and just wanted to pop the drug? In this particular case, one's a victim, one's a perpetrator.
Well, remember, and I think to say one's a victim, one's a perpetrator, I guess it depends on the audience, really.
I guess you're right.
And so, you know, it could be, and let's face it, Chris, you and I have experienced in our lifetimes many, or at least been privy to information about many instances and issues in which a person started off doing something and then graduated or morphosized to something totally different. Those sorts of things happen. And so with this guy with the bad back, you know, it could be that initially it was something legitimate. But I think what happens is, and I'm not here to place blame or cast blame, but I do think at some point, once the addiction starts, I think it goes from illicit to illicit. And whatever the outcome is based on the cascading effects of it becoming illicit end up occurring, i.e. him doctor shopping, him forging a prescription maybe.
Yeah, well, that's a whole different area now.
And it is. But I'm only saying that to say, I as an agent, we as DEA, I don't know that we are the right authority to get in the weeds on whether or not Suboxone is better than keeping a person on a certain pain medication or whatever. Those sorts of issues are handled on the Hill through a regulatory congressional style process that we have a part in, but only from the perspective of what are you doing as an agency involving these types of drugs, not from the perspective of should this be used, should this not be used, should they be used together, should a person remain on this or that. That's really not our arena, unfortunately.
So which makes sense, which makes sense, because that still leaves all of these other questions to be tackled. And let's even flip it around a little bit more. Say the physician who's arguing about this particular drug and this drug combination. You know, it's a big argument about the so-called benzodiazepines, whether they can be used with the narcotics or not. You know, that's a big argument. You know, and do you guys get that deep involved with those types of things?
That's more of a FDA type question. That's not to say that we don't have some input, but that's more of an FDA type question.
All right, but once the question is solved, that's when you guys pull the trigger and go out with the
right. So once the question is solved, hey, this drug is now on the market, then our job is to ensure that it's remaining in the circle in its proper manner.
Okay, good deal. Now let's deal with this. You had mentioned about the perpetrator-victim thing. Now but there is a graduating effect called a gateway drug deal, where you start with alcohol. Then you go to cigarettes, or cigarettes first and alcohol, or whatever. Alcohol. But then the next drug becomes marijuana. Is that a true statement?
Well, the studies, there are a lot of studies about how our gateway drugs work. I can tell you that in my lifetime as an agent and in my career and the things I've seen, it appears to be true in at least the instances that I'm aware of. But of course, as you know, there are a lot of studies to support that. That the gateway process is a true process.
Okay, and I was wondering about that. You go to marijuana, then the cocaine, and the meth, amphetamine, or whatever. What about culturally? Do you find that it sits into certain cultures, like certain groups? In other words, people try and keep their children from certain people because if you hang around this group, they use drugs, and your kid will use drugs. You see a lot of that.
I'll tell you, I don't know that maybe that was true in the 60s, 70s, 80s, maybe. I don't see that as being true these days, and I'll tell you why. Because I think with all that we have at our fingertips now, you know, we are such a connected world, and I think through those connections, all of those old school barriers that used to be present are no longer present. And so you see more of a societal acceptance for so many different things. And in that, I think you'll see groups of people, and you've seen it as well, huddle together that 30 years ago you say, wow, I'd never see that hodgepodge group of people hanging out together. I'm sure you've seen it, and I know I have. And so I'm saying from that perspective, I think obviously responsible parents do what they can to talk with their children, to talk to them about the dangers of drugs, to talk to them about the fallout of poor choices. But I also think there is this strong gravitational pull that occurs among our peers when we're not around our parents, when we are running in these circles. That is age old because it's always been that way. But now it's even more prevalent because we have more information at our fingertips. You know, if I say, "Hey, don't try such and such," it can put green dots on your face. What are you gonna do? You're gonna break out your smartphone and you're gonna look. I don't know if that's true. I think I'm gonna try it anyway. I don't know if that's true.
Wow.
You know, so I, in that regard, I think our society is different, and I think we are bold, and that's not always good. You know.
Okay.
And I think it brings about the supply and demand, and I think that's why we use and abuse the majority of drugs in this world. The
freedom and boldness, that combination together. Now, and again, we're 15 states have legalized marijuana some sort of way. How does that affect how you guys look at not just prescription drug use, but any other drug use in general that move towards legalization? Does that affect it at the point of investigation and in the way in which you guys operate, the Drug Enforcement Administration? In other words, a lot of people are saying, let's eliminate the Drug Enforcement Administration, let's just legalize everything.
Sure. No, our position has been the same. Our administrator has talked about it. Michelle Linhart has talked about it many, many times through congressional hearings and during speeches in different places. Our position is the same. And I said this when you and I first began talking.
Right.
We enforce violations of the Controlled Substances Act. That's all of the acts that fall under federal law, and that's what we enforce. And so, as long as if it falls under the purview of a violation of the Controlled Substances Act, then we investigate and enforce that.
Cut and dry.
Yes,
that's it.
Yes.
Regardless of what's going on, you guys don't have to actually play a part in what's going on in the arguments within society and within the medical field, within the view of drugs, until the laws are changed. And as long as the Controlled Substances Act stays the way it is and the drug is assumed to be illegal, then the same force applies from your standpoint, because then you guys are not the ones who actually, you're not the judge and jury anyway. You're just presenting the information. Is that
well,
correct?
we're never the judge and jury, no matter what the case is. So, as I said, if it's a violation of the CSA, the Controlled Substances Act, then we'll take a look at it. If it's not, then we won't.
That sounds good. I mean, it speaks of fairness.
Sure.
It really, really does, you know, and it presents it that way. So again, let's back it all around again. Tell us a little bit about these investigations, in a sense, like you say, how they get, how they're grabbed. How do you do? I mean, people think about CSI and, you know, the little program on TV. Is it, you know, how do you guys operate, in a sense? It's all secret, though.
It's all secret, right? Yeah. We operate like CSI. No, it's very cut and dried. Oftentimes, we have, unfortunately, people in the community who get fed up with seeing their community going down, or their community being taken advantage of by a small group of people who are basically holding them hostage due to their criminal activity, including drug trafficking. And so as a result, we'll get tips, we'll get calls, we'll get anonymous calls, we'll get letters, we'll get tips sent to our online sites for our DEA and DOJ sites. And so there are a multitude of ways in which information comes to us, and then we'll just take a look and start our investigation based on what we see.
But and I guess we'll go back again to that concept, though. And we speak about it as a color blindness in every way, shape, or form. But I always ask the question. I know we had a gentleman, state senator by the name of Joe LaPinto. He was on some years ago, and the question then was, do those methods actually, particularly when talking about prescription drug abuse, if something is wrong, then everybody who's doing wrong should be dealt with about it. You see what I'm saying? Does that method almost kind of like cherry pick certain instances and so forth, where it's not looking at the totality of what's going on, say in a medical profession or even in the neighborhood? It doesn't look like everybody in the neighborhood. It pretty much just cherry picks certain groups. This one here, this one here.
As far as prescription drugs, I don't necessarily submit to that, and here's why. As you know, when we're talking about prescription drugs,
right,
every DEA registrant has to have a DEA number. They have to register, and so it'd be different if we said, okay, here in the state of Louisiana, the northern part of the state, you guys don't have to register. Have all the doctors you want, all the pharmacies you want. You don't have to register. Right. But here in South Louisiana, every pharmacy, every doctor must be a DEA registrant. Really? Well, okay. Well, then I could appreciate.
In other states, this doesn't have to be a DEA registrant.
Well, I could appreciate your position, but the fact of the matter is that everyone in this country, everyone in this country, who is a licensed doctor or pharmacist, has to be a DEA registrant. Same thing with distributors, those sorts of entities. So my point is, it doesn't allow an opportunity to kind of cherry pick, as you talked about. It's pretty cut and dried. If you're doing what you're supposed to be doing as a DEA registrant, then the chances of you coming on our radar are probably very, very slim.
So all of the big arguments actually reside more with the medical board. The looseness, those things that actually don't come in privy to the DEA in of itself. You guys kind of operate outside of that. So all of those issues and therapeutic use, misuse. But anyway, we're done. We got to come at this again. Chris Sylvain with Health Issues. Learn as much as you can, listen as much as you can, be totally aware, and always do the right thing. Thank you so much.